Thank you to everyone who's already joined. As it says in the chat, we're just going to wait a couple of minutes to start to give people a chance to get into the webinar. So if you just bear with us. So I think we'll make a start. Welcome everybody this evening. My name's Sarah Hayward. I'm a director at Croydon Council, and I'll be chairing this evening. Just as it says on the screen there, we are recording this webinar so that we can put it on the website for people who are unable to attend. So by staying on the session, you are agreeing to it being recorded. So if that bothers you in any way, I'm afraid you will need to leave, but you will be able to view it afterwards. But obviously, we would really like you to stay. I'm joined tonight by Councillor Olive Lewis, who's the Cabinet member covering libraries, and Rob Hunt, who's one of our heads of service, who's overseeing this process. And I'm just going to bring in Councillor Lewis for some welcome remarks.
Thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Oliver Lewis, and I'm the Council's Cabinet Member for Culture and Regeneration. It's really good to see lots of you here. It's great that in Croydon we have so many people who are interested in and passionate about their library service. As you'll all be aware, the council is in some very difficult financial times, and as a result of this, we're having to take some very, very tough decisions from right across the council, including in libraries, to dramatically reduce our expenditure. We're currently out to consultation on the future of 5 libraries in the borough, including Bradmore Green, but also Broad Green, South Norwood, Shirley and Sanderstead. This is the first phase of the consultation, and these webinars are part of that first phase. And I'm pleased that we've been able to extend this first phase until the 14th of March. We've done a number of webinars already. We had a couple on Saturday, a sort of overview, and one about community-run libraries. And then we've done 5, or we're in the middle of doing 5 this week, 1 for each of the 5 affected libraries. And that we hope that through the consultation, we may be able to develop some community-run models that maintain the current level of library services, but also help us to dramatically reduce our expenditure. I'm going to leave it there, but I just want to finish by saying thanks again to everyone for joining us on the call this evening. And thanks to all of our hardworking library staff for everything that they're doing in really tough times. And look, I'll pass over to Rob, but I look forward to the conversation and receiving your questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Good evening, everybody. I'm Robert Hunt, Interim Head of Assets and Involvement, responsible for libraries and museums and archives and parks and green spaces. So just run through some details around the process that we're currently going through. We are in phase 1 of a 2-phase process on consultation around our library service. Within phase 1, this is an information gathering approach to try and get feedback from the community and residents across Croydon about how our library services are used and how that service can be changed. And we've made the proposal of closing 5 libraries or operating on a cost-neutral basis, and they are Broad Green, Bradmore Green, Sanderstead, Shirley and South Norwood. The first phase is, as I said, information gathering to allow us to make an informed decision for phase 2. And in phase 2, we will go back out with additional information that will be much more detailed proposal. And again, we will consult with you on that. So just to provide some timescales around the whole process. We launched the library's public consultation on the 14th of January this year, and that will run until the 14th of March. We've extended that by a week. As we know, there's been some issues with the postal service to allow paper copies of the survey to be received back. We are hosting or have hosted webinars for each of the affected libraries. And as Councillor Lewis mentioned, we hosted an all library webinar on Saturday, followed by a peer session with community-run library network, which identified 6 different libraries from across the country. So from Jedburgh up in Newcastle right the way down to Wool in Devon, as well as a few in central London, and as to how different community-run libraries could be operated. And then a webinar for each of the 5 libraries affected. Tonight is the last night of the webinars with Bradmore Green and Sanderstead. All of the webinars will be uploaded later this week onto our library's consultation website. So please do take a look there if you need to look back at any information, if you want to watch again, if you need to signpost any other people within the community who were unable to attend. So please do refer them back to that resource. On the library's consultation website, there's also our online survey that we're asking people to complete to provide feedback. There are a number of questions and suggestions, as well as text options for people to be able to provide their feedback. People can complete that survey multiple times, so if you have already completed and there's more information that comes through tonight or over the coming weeks that you want to feedback, you are more than welcome to do that multiple times. The survey can be requested in paper format if you do not have digital access, and that can be through our dedicated email address, which is librariesconsultation@croydon.gov.uk, or through a dedicated telephone number, which I'll provide at the end of the webinar. So once the first phase consultation process ends on the 14th of March, we'll be gathering all of the feedback that you've provided through the surveys, through emails, through conversations that we'll had with individual and community groups. And that will form the basis of a report to scrutiny on the 30th of March. That report will show the analysis that we've taken and the feedback today, as well as our next steps and our proposals for the library service going forward. We'll then move into phase 2 of the consultation process, which will start with a report to Cabinet in May that outlines the detailed proposals for the library service. We'll run a phase 2 consultation process throughout May and June, allowing you an opportunity to provide further feedback around the detailed proposals. And then through the summer, we'll work through the Council's decision-making process of scrutiny, Cabinet and Council, with a plan to start to implement any changes to the service from the autumn. So I'm pleased to say that as of the 13th of February, we've had 1,493 respondents, and as of today, that's increased to just short of 1,700 responses. So we're really pleased that we're getting such a high level of feedback from the community. It shows the passion and commitment that our residents have for the library service. So it's really, really encouraging to see that. We've been doing some analysis as we've been going along. One of the questions that we've asked our respondents is, which is your local library? And of the responses received as of the 13th of February, over 90% of those have been from library members. For Bradmore Green, we've had had 142 responses, which is just over 11% of the total responses received today, which is encouraging, but we would like you to provide further information, and really this is a call for everybody to complete the survey and get the information back to us to help us inform our decisions going forward. Another question that we asked as part of the survey was around what are the top 3 priorities. Of the respondents, over 1,350 selected at least 3 options, and they were the priorities that appear to be coming forward are around borrowing and browsing of the books within our library buildings, around activities and events both for children and adults, for the ability to use our computers and digital equipment such as Wi-Fi and printing, and as well, and something that we're pleased to see, but didn't necessarily have all of the information before, was around people using our library buildings both for work and research, as well as school and homework activities. So it's really good to see how people are prioritising the services that we currently offer. So just looking at Bradmore Green in a little bit more detail, it's currently open for 44.5 hours per week. There are over 41,500 visits annually, but that only makes up just over 2.8% of all visits across our libraries within Croydon. The library is home to 11,960 books, which generate 24,747 issues annually. And again, that makes up about 4.2% of all the issues across the borough. There are 5 PCs that can be used by children and adults within the library, and they generate 1,747 IT sessions, but of the available time, they're only used 14.7% of the time. We were asked to provide further information around the trends over the last 5 years across all of our libraries, and that information will be published on our library's consultation website, so across all 13 libraries within Croydon. But this slide just focuses specifically on the 5 libraries within the proposal. For Broad Green, we can see that in 2015-16, there were just over 59,000 visits, and in 1920 that reduced down to 38,900 visits, which follows the trend across the library sector of decreased footfall, but can be seen sort of quite clearly. Sorry, I realised I read Broad Green figures out there. My mistake. Sorry, Bradmore Green in 2015-16 it was 54,600 visits, reducing down to 41,500 in 2019-20. And again, that follows the trend across library services, both within the borough and nationally. The number of book issues in Bradmore Green in 2015-16 were at 36,200 and have reduced down to 24,700 in 2019-20, which again mirrors that trend of a reduced number of visits and book issues. And then again, looking at the IT usage across the 5 libraries, at Bradmore Green in 2015-16, there were 3,408 IT sessions, and that reduced down to 1,747, which is a 48.7% reduction in that 5-year period. Again, we've been asked for additional information around operational expenditure at each of our libraries. At Bradmore Green, we currently pay just over £6,500 per year for business rates. This is a discounted rate to the library service. If a community run library were to look to take that on, they would need to work with colleagues in our business rates teams to whether those rates will continue to be discounted. In addition, we pay £245 per year for cash in transit, so moving any cash that we receive on site back into the bank. And then we generate about £2,300 from selling of sort of small stationery items, food waste bags, posters, and the like. A question that we've been asked, and is a trend that's coming out of the surveys that we received so far, is around how much do we spend on our book stock. We do buy books at a borough-wide level as part of the Libraries Consortium, and we do receive a discount as part of that. But proportionally, our spend on Bradmore Green Library would be about £10,000, and that covers adults, children's and large print materials. Some more questions that we've received and looking to respond to tonight around the maintenance and repair costs for each of our libraries. For reactive maintenance, so where there's been an unplanned event such as a leak, over the last 3 years, we've spent £6,800 in 18-19, £3,800 in 19-20, and £153 during the first 6 months of 2020. And from a planned perspective, so where we need to do servicing and routine maintenance, that was static at £991 in 18-19 and 19-20, and was about half of that for the first 6 months of 2020. Been questions about the building condition and any works that need to take place over the coming years, and we carried out a building condition survey in 2019, and as part of that, it highlighted that there is several elements of work that we need to consider. So there's some repointing to the external brickwork, repairs to the flat roof canopy, repairs or upgrades to the rainwater downpipes and damp rectification works, as well as some upgrade to the electrical wiring. And it is estimated that that would cost about £20,000. That is an estimate rather than a quotation, so there's some ability to change that figure slightly up or down based upon inflation, but it's just to give a flavour of what we would expect to need to spend over the coming years. Across all of our surveys, we've been asked around what will happen to the books and the PCs if the library building was to close. We would look to move as many books and PCs as possible into neighbouring libraries. Any books that couldn't go onto to the shelves because of capacity would be held in reserve and could be requested from the neighbouring library and reserved, and they would be delivered for collection. From a PC perspective, we recently upgraded all of our IT equipment, and we would house as many additional PCs as we could in neighbouring libraries. Obviously, we'd have to take into consideration space limitations, but we would move as much as possible as we could across the rest of the library portfolio. Again, we were asked around how individuals could then access activities and community spaces if the library was to close, and we would work with the community to find other relevant spaces, working with community groups and voluntary sector groups, and any other providers that may be out there to try and fill that need. And we've also been asked around what would happen if an individual was unable to travel to their next nearest library. For those who are eligible and have mobility needs, mobility issues and additional needs, we do have a home library service. And if you're interested in that, we would then be able to potentially be able to deliver books to the door of those who are eligible. And in addition to that, we also have a befriending service run by volunteers that can also travel on your behalf to the library to collect books and deliver them, and to work with you to meet your library needs. Regarding suggestions around income generation, we've been asked about how our spaces could be hired out, either out of hours or particular rooms within our library buildings. And each library has its own individual layout and space issues that we would need to work through. Some buildings lend themselves much more to be able to be hired out. Bradmore Green Library's space is quite limited, particularly with the layout of the shelving within the building. But it is something that we will potentially look at as an option. Been asked around whether we could house cafes and shops within our library buildings, and we have looked to do that. It's not always possible, again, based upon size and layout. So the newly refurbished Norbury Library does have a cafe space, but the recently refurbished Selsdon Library doesn't, and that again it's just down to individual layout and circumstances. Cafes in libraries, from our experience with speaking to colleagues in other local authorities, generally don't generate much additional income into the library service. They're there as an incentive to keep people in libraries longer and to allow people who are studying to stay without having to go out for lunch, or if they need to grab a drink. But they generally don't generate large amounts of income, which would then change the operation of the service. Some suggestions that have come back about charging for desk space for small businesses and entrepreneurs, and that's something that we will look at. We don't want to discourage people from using our library spaces, but if there is a need and demand out there for small businesses to be able to use our libraries as for hot desks, for example, we will look as to how that could be accommodated. Another suggestion has been around our libraries being used for art galleries and event space, and I'm pleased to say that we are working with colleagues in our museum and archive service as to how we can develop those proposals leading into the Borough of Culture in 2023. Some of the things we do need to consider before that happens are around security and environmental conditions, so that there's no risk then to the artifacts that are being displayed. But it is something that we are looking to take forward. And regarding fundraising, that's something that's easier for the local community to do and then donate to the library service than it would be for the service to generate itself. We're able to look at sort of grant funding opportunities that are out there, but from a fundraising perspective, that's something that's best done by the community. Community-run libraries are an option that's available. We hosted a webinar on Saturday with Community-Run Libraries National Peer Network, and as I mentioned earlier, we had some really good examples of the different ranges and options around business models that community-run libraries can operate with. Some working very closely with local authorities, where books purchased by the local authority, the library management system stays the same, digital access remains the same, but comes at a cost by the community-run library, right the way through to other examples where they are completely separate organisations. They buy their own books or rely on donations, generate all their own income from events and activities. And so we are open to all potential options as part of this phase one. It's around information gathering. So if anybody is interested in running a community library or just wants to have more of a conversation with us about how that could potentially work, please do send through your details either via the survey or as part of via our dedicated email address, which is librariesconsultation@croydon.gov.uk, and we'll arrange to have a meeting to discuss further with individuals and community groups. So I'll hand over now to Sarah to start the Q&A process.
Thank you very much, Rob. So we've got a few questions in the chat, but we'd also asked for questions in advance. So I'm going to go through some of the questions that people kindly emailed on. I know a few of the people have joined us on the webinar. So first, a few questions from Sue Thornton. The first one, just a very practical question about why have another webinar on the same day as the first main consultation seminar. 1 hour is long enough to concentrate. And I haven't tried to book the second as I have a life. But so this is just a really sort of practical question about trying to give people the maximum opportunity to be able to engage with us. So on Saturday, we held an open access one about all of the proposals and a specialist session about community libraries for groups that were interested in finding out more about how to run community libraries. We know it's difficult for some people to attend them all, which is one of the reasons why we're recording these sessions and putting them up on the website. Obviously the consultation period is time limited, so we just had to strike a balance about when we organize them. So hopefully you'll find the recording helpful when they go up online, and apologies if it caused you any inconvenience. So then we've got two questions again from Sue about the reading club at Bradmore Green Library, and asking firstly whether the reading club can be part of the unexplained Openplus model. So maybe actually a bit of an explanation about what Openplus will actually mean practically for libraries, and then how reading clubs can use the library space operating under that model. And then a very practical question for the users of the reading club. Do we expect the 75% of the reading club to travel and park sufficient further away at Coulsdon Library, and how will we take that into account? Rob, do you want to try and answer those two?
Yeah, so just to give a bit more background around Openplus. So Openplus is a model of accessing the library outside of normal staffed hours. It's where technology, so there's a PIN code on the door with a relevant library card that allows somebody access into the building. CCTVs in place to be able to monitor activity, that allows sort of pre-screened individuals access to the library building, so we know who's in there and what they're doing. They still be able to access all the books, to be able to use all the self-service machines to be able to take out book issues, as well as access to IT equipment, and that is designed to give additional hours both sort of at the start of the day and the end of the day, where there wouldn't necessarily be a paid member of staff present. It's used across about 20% of libraries in the country, so it's a recognised technology, and we've as part of our refurbishment at Selsdon and Norbury Library, we have put that technology in place. Regarding the reading groups, it's really good to see that there's an active reading group that's still present and have been running since 2011 in Bradmore Green. It is challenging, I suppose, around how going forwards, that group would then continue to use the service. We would work with that group to accommodate as many as possible within Coulsdon Library. There is the option of the community run library, so it may not necessarily be that the building is closed permanently if somebody else could come in to operate. Or the reading group, they don't necessarily have to meet in the library. There are other alternatives, and we'll work with the group to try and find an alternate solution if that is the case.
Sorry, I didn't turn me off mute there. No, it's fine. Did you want to come in, Councillor Lewis? No, brilliant. So the next question, still staying with Sue Thornton's question here. If you take away Bradmore Green Library, why do you not expect to increase significantly the number of members of the home library / mobile library service? Rob, how have we taken that into account?
We would need to check the eligibility of individuals who need the home library service, and if there is a significant increase in demand, then we would have to look at how we accommodated that across the whole of the library service. As part of this consultation, and in phase 1, it's about gathering feedback on the implications of if the library was to close. So if your feelings are that the impact of the library closing is that you would then need to use the home library service, then we'd like to hear that feedback, and we can then start to gauge the impact that it would have on the rest of the service going forwards, and how we may need to balance spend elsewhere.
Brilliant, thank you. And then the final question from Sue is actually just a very practical one about the fact that the library is currently used as a polling station on election days, and what we would do if the library closed. And just to say, so obviously there's potential for the library to stay open if a community group comes forward to run it, or to propose for it to be put to alternative use. So we might not need to find a new polling station, and you can use other facilities in the area, potentially schools, church halls. There's some community organisations in the area, and polling stations have to meet specific guidance, but there are other options in the area on that one. I don't know whether Rob or Councillor Lewis have got anything to add about its use as a polling station. I'm just going to come to some of the questions on the chat now, and then go back to the pre-submitted ones later. So Brenda Monkton asks about an issue that's come up on all of our webinars so far about libraries being considered safe spaces for vulnerable adults and children. So really it's a question about the impact and how we'll take that into account. Councillor Lewis, do you want to come in first?
Yeah, look, I'll just come in on the polling station point first, and then I'll answer this question. Sorry, I didn't get in quite quickly enough. But obviously, at the moment, the council is preparing for the London GLA and mayoral elections, which are due to take place in May. And because of coronavirus legislation and guidance, a lot of our polling stations in schools are having to move to alternative locations. And our electoral services team are in the process of identifying locations and making sure they're fit to be held. So obviously it would be a similar situation if we weren't able to use the library for whatever reason. Then the electoral services team would look to identify other suitable places in the community. So there's already experience of doing that. On the point around the impact on vulnerable adults and children or other groups in the community. Obviously, we recognise that if any libraries are to close, that will have an impact on how people access the service and how people how people's routines and habits change. What I would say is that it's really important that people complete the survey. Let us know how changes to library services might affect you, because that will help us to make a decision about what happens going forward. I'd also say that we'll be doing a full equalities impact assessment as part of the consultation, and that will take into account the impact of any service changes on vulnerable groups or other groups in the community. But look, I mean, I'm hopeful that through this consultation process, we might identify some community-run models of operation and ownership that might mean that we can continue the level of service at the same site, but without, but whilst reducing the costs to the council. So look, get your surveys in, spread the word, and let us know how these changes might affect you.
Thank you, Rob. Have you got anything to add?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you very much. And staying in the Q&A, the live Q&A for a minute, Janet Stollery asks, I'd like to know how you could possibly close the consultation in March when you're not even able to supply hard copies of the consultation for us to distribute to our residents who are not online. I'm still waiting for the rest of the documents so I can do this. I was only sent part of what I actually asked for. And just to answer that for Janet and others, Janet, in your specific case, some copies were sent out from our print services on the 20th, so on Saturday. We are aware that there have been some challenges in Royal Mail locally. We are not the only organisation impacted by that. They've had some COVID outbreaks and lost some staff to isolation and what have you. If there are ways in a COVID secure way that we can get the copies to you that you want, we will consider other options for delivery or collection. Obviously, it needs to protect your public health and our staff's public health. But if there's an alternative way that we can try and get those to you, do email us and we will endeavour to do that. So apologies for any inconvenience there. I just wanted to answer that one for everybody.
Thanks, Sarah. Just a little bit more generally, I think it's important to say that we have consulted with the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, and we are following their advice in terms of best practice and any mitigations given the circumstances with coronavirus. So we are working with the government to try and do this as best we can. Yeah,
and on that, we'd had a question submitted in advance from Sally Ann Volk on a similar point about the practicalities of doing this at this time. So could this consultation process be postponed? Mental health issues are becoming a major problem during this pandemic. I'm receiving many messages from worried people who are desperate to help save our libraries and cannot access this consultation because they are not online or are already pressured with major issues such as health, disability, childcare and financial problems. Wait until things are more stable and we can meet properly. Is this possible to help with the mental health in our community of all ages? That surely is top of your agenda. I'll bring Councillor Lewis back in a second, but just to say, we'd obviously planned to start the consultation when we were still open up. There was still, and we had actually intended to do more normal face-to-face activity. You know, it is really difficult to do a consultation in this way, and it's really challenging. As Councillor Lewis said, we have been talking to the DCMS about the Department of Culture, Media and Sport about how we do this during this time. There is a second phase to the consultation that's due to start mid-April, and after the date that the indicative date that the government have given for libraries to reopen. So we hope in the second phase we will be able to do something more normal, but obviously that does depend on the coronavirus COVID restrictions that are in place at the time. Councillor Lewis, do you want to add anything to that?
Not at the moment, I don't think, Sarah. No, I think that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. So then some more questions from Sally Ann Vogue. If the council decide to close the Bradmore Green Library, what are they proposing to do to fulfil their statutory duty to provide a library service? This is a word often used by council representatives. To our many elderly, disabled and young children up here on this very high hill, people are becoming more worried as so many rely on the library.
Yeah, look, just in response to that, obviously, we do have to deliver a library service that meets our statutory obligations as a provider of library services. It doesn't say how many sites we have to deliver it in, and but obviously any change to the number of sites where we deliver library services you know, will have an impact on our communities. what I would say is that it's really important to fill out the consultation, let us know how any changes to the library service will affect you. But, you know, hopefully, you know, if there is a change to the library service, people will be able to continue to access it through either the mobile libraries we've discussed already, or virtually, or by travelling to another library. But if that's, and look, you know, we hope that through this consultation process, we might be able to work with community groups to develop a community-run model of operation and ownership that might mean that the library service can continue in that location. But if that's not possible, then there are other options, and we'll support people to help them access the service wherever it may be.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. This is one Sally-Ann Boak has asked as well, and it's come up again. It's come up in all of our sessions. What does cost neutral mean? Rob, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, so cost neutral is the council's faced with a very difficult situation. The library service have been asked to save in the region of £500,000 in our operating costs. And so we need to be able to then operate a library service that fits within that financial headroom. So we are looking at alternative ways of being able to provide that library service. There are a number of different options. The worst case scenario, I suppose, would be closing the 5 libraries that we believe would then bring about those savings. There are a number of different options, sort of anywhere in between, that would be if those libraries could remain open but operated by community groups, or there's been other suggestions around, could we just reduce all the hours across all of the library service? Could we look at different models as to how that's operated? But for us, we need to work within that financial envelope. So from a cost neutral basis, it means that we can't spend any more than the money that we've been allocated. We are looking at this flexibly and based on the feedback that's been provided. And if there are different models, and I'll go back to community run libraries as just as an example, just from what was said on Saturday. Some of the community run models used existing council contracts to buy books, existing library management system, and IT equipment, and paid to be part of that, whereas other models were completely separate and didn't rely on any council contribution. There are, I suppose, multiple different options, and we're willing to work with through all the different suggestions that come through, but it's about staying within that cost envelope.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lewis, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, look, just to say that we are having to make some really, really tough decisions to dramatically reduce our expenditure. Like Rob said, if you know, there are community models out there which incur additional costs to the council, then we'll have to find that money elsewhere within the budget. But ultimately, we're looking for options which help us to reduce our expenditure.
Thank you. And so Sally-Ann Boak's last question links libraries to the Borough of Culture, and says in 2023, which is the year the borough has been nominated to launch cultural events, the Bradmore Green Library Supporters Group, of which I am a founder member, are planning an exhibition to celebrate 60 years of this iconic building, which was built in 1963 and is renowned for its brilliant design and construction. Should I now cancel this idea and let people know it won't take place? Councillor Lewis?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, no decisions have been taken on the future of Bradmore Green Library at the moment. You know, we're hopeful that it may be taken on by a community group that may continue to run a library from that building. And look, I mean, we're all looking forward to 2023. You know, I hope that any exhibitions which are planned can take place either at the library that is being run by a community group or at an alternative venue. So, yeah.
Thank you. And we're coming back to the chat now. So Janet Stollery has said library visit figures for 2020 not relevant as the library was closed. The figures that Rob used in his presentation were actually for the year 2019, 2020. So for that financial year from April 2019 until the end of March 2020. So the libraries were only actually closed for about the last week of that. Elizabeth Ashes, thank you, Robert, for confirming that the data will be available. Lucia Brialt, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, has asked about the floor plans being made available. And yes, we will. We'll add them to the consultation pages on the website. We've got another question about the impact of how closing Bradmore Green Library will impact elderly and disabled residents in Coulsdon and young and disadvantaged residents. Obviously, we've already spoken about the equalities impact. Do either of you want to add anything to what we've already said about the equalities impacts?
Just to say, so a full equalities impact assessment will be completed as part of the phase 2 proposals. This is phase 1. It's about information gathering. We are open to all different suggestions as to what could happen to across the library service. And based upon the feedback as part of phase 1, we will develop detailed plans, and we will look at how those plans then impact on the community, and particularly elderly residents, residents with a disability, young protected characteristic groups, to make sure that nobody's overwhelmingly disadvantaged, and try to mitigate those risks as much as possible. But that level of detail will start to come out as part of phase 2.
Thank you. And just to say that the equalities impact assessments will be published, so everyone will be able to interrogate them and see that information that's been taken into account. Councillor Bird asks, what cost would be passed on to volunteers? Would Croydon do all the maintenance identified as needed at their cost as the landlord? I'll bring you in a second on that, Rob, but Councillor Bird, if you're still on, you've also asked how many have attended, please, and I'm not sure what you mean attended. If it's these webinars, we'll give out the figures, but if you could just clarify that, that'd be helpful. Rob, maintenance costs for community run libraries.
Yeah, so from a community run library perspective, as I said earlier, there are a number of different models available, and some are based upon the local authority continuing maintenance, the buildings used under a license basis, whereas other examples, the community group have taken on sole responsibility for repairs, maintenance of the building, and so we don't want to be prescriptive at this stage as to say any particular model will or won't work, or we're not willing to listen to different solutions. If any community groups are interested in running the library, then we will we'll have a conversation with them as to what could be feasible. But at this stage, it's about hearing the ideas of the local community. We've had conversations within the council as to how we could potentially, going forward, use the community infrastructure levy funding, SIL, to potentially support future maintenance costs, but they're at a very, very early stage at this point. So it depends on the proposals that are coming from the community.
Yeah, look, I think it was a really strong message that we got from the webinar on Saturday with the Community Run Libraries Network that, you know, any model of community operation has to be bottom up from the community. So we look forward to receiving any thoughts or ideas about how community groups might look to run a library and how they might fund any works which are needed. Sarah, you're on mute.
I knew I'd do that at some point in these webinars. Sorry, apologies, everyone. Councillor Bird observes that 2 polling districts use the library as its polling station as schools can't be used during COVID. I think just to say on that, obviously we're not talking about taking a decision on the libraries until after this May's London mayoral elections. So we'd have plenty of time to plan new polling stations for future elections. I don't know, Councillor Lewis, whether you want to come in again on that issue or not.
Well, no, look, I'll defer to Councillor Bird's local knowledge, and obviously we'll work with local members and the community to identify suitable places for polling stations should the library not be possible to be used.
So thank you. Lucia Bryalt asks, have you taken account of the building's locally listed status and its location in a conservation area? Rob?
Yes, that's one of our considerations. But that's also as part of the information that we have around footfall and issues and digital access, as well as maintenance costs. It is a consideration to us, but it's not the be all and end all of our decision making process.
Thank you. Gillian Smith asks, how can a home library service compensate for wider socialising which visiting a library provides? I think that's an important point, and I think it's really important that people bring out that particular aspect of library use in their responses to the consultation, and is obviously a material consideration as we're doing the equalities impact assessment. I don't know whether Councillor Lewis wants to add anything to that. Yeah,
well, look, just to say that there will be a library service going forward, so people can access that in, you know, whatever locations they like. Look, if people aren't able to access the library service as well as the home library service, we also have a befriending service, so that can help to engage people and provide a little bit of social contact. Look, and then there's the use of technology, isn't there, which helps people to connect in tough times. Look, you know, fill out the consultation form, let us know how you think the potential closure of a library might impact you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Ash asks, can you please produce a list of community libraries that are delivering what you have expressed is what you would like to achieve, i.e. community libraries that are run cost neutral to the council but still deliver the same level of service as a properly funded and staffed public library service. I'll bring Councillor Lewis in a second, but we haven't sort of expressed what we want from community libraries, because the point is that the community comes forward with a service offer that suits their needs. And I think when the community libraries workshop is uploaded onto the onto our website, what you'll hear from those community libraries is that some of them deliver very different services to what was being delivered to the local authority's previous offer, in direct response to what the community has told the community library groups that they want. So there is no particular right or wrong model with community libraries. They need to be responsive to what the community needs and can provide. Councillor Lewis, do you want to add anything?
Just to agree with that, really, we haven't specified any particular model. You know, we're looking potentially, you know, there's 5 libraries which are up for consultation, and we could have potentially 5 very different models, very different kind of ways of funding the library service, very different ways of accessing it, all sorts of different things. Look, it's really important that communities find the best model for their circumstances and their locations.
Thank you. And then Dawn Gibbons asked a question about how many postal forms have been sent out, and we'll answer that in the FAQs. We do have the numbers because we discussed them in the pre-meet, but I haven't got them to hand at the minute. Councillor Bird asks, can we get the post office to do a leaflet drop in the ward? They are delivering, but individuals should not be due to COVID regs. We would have to pay postage on a ward-wide leaflet drop. So I'm not clear that that would be a cost-effective way of getting information out. Library staff are calling library users We are encouraging people to use their local community networks, including councillors. And as I said before, if people are struggling to access forms when they've asked for them to be posted out, let us know and we'll work out whether we can do a different COVID secure delivery method with individuals, including those people who've asked for sort of 30 forms to take to their to give around their own groups and what have you.
Yeah, look, just on that, Sarah, obviously we live in a fractured media environment these days. You know, gone are the days where you could put an advert in the Croydon Advertiser and reach, you know, pretty much everyone in the borough. You know, community leaders like Councillor Bird, but also if there's other community leaders in the ward who are networked with particular groups, please do spread the word, please do share the consultation, and hopefully we can reach as many people as possible in some really tough times.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. So we've just got a few minutes left, so I'm going to try and get through as many. I'll bring you in a second, Rob. We're going to try and get through as many questions as we can, but just to reassure you, we will answer them all via the FAQs if we don't get through them all by the end of the session. Rob.
Just to add to the leaflet drop, we do have a dedicated telephone line that is staffed by library members. So if somebody would like the survey to be completed over the telephone, a member of the libraries team would be willing to input that digitally through a telephone conversation.
Brilliant, thank you. A really important point. Gillian Smith asks about visually impaired residents accessing large print books. Rob, can you tell us about the criteria, a bit about the criteria for the home library service?
So the home library service is for residents who have mobility access issues or recognised disability that would then mean that it's difficult for them to travel. They are able to register. Once they've registered, they then put in a request for the books that they would like to receive. So large print books, we have a selection of Braille books, for example, and they can be delivered to the door by a dedicated member of the libraries team who operates the home library service. So we would look to be able to incorporate that within the existing service. Obviously, if we were inundated with requests and couldn't meet demand, we'd have to look at how that then operated going forwards.
Thank you, Rob. Lucia Bryalt, I'm very nervous that I'm mispronouncing her surname every time I say it, so I'm sorry if I am, asks about the use of SIL money for covering some of the library services. She acknowledges we can't use it to run core statutory services. Can you say a bit about that, Rob?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be for the day-to-day operation of the libraries, but it could potentially be used for repairs and maintenance on the buildings. We are in early discussions with colleagues as to how that could be used going forwards. Obviously, we would need to be able to show a need from the community that for that library building going forwards. Within our proposals, it's around the closure or cost neutral operation, and that's from an operational budget perspective, but the maintenance costs could potentially or partly be covered by SIL money, but that's just something that we're exploring at the moment.
Thank you. Gillian Smith asks, which companies provided the estimates for the repairs to Bradmore Green Library?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look at the form. It's one of the contractors that are used by our colleagues in facilities management. So they undertook a number of condition surveys across multiple corporate buildings, but I just need to check that.
Thank you. And we have just about come to the end of the session. We're at 6:30, which is when we said we would conclude. And we do have another session due to start. So I think I'm going to call it a day there. I need to apologise to everyone who was asked a question in the Q&A that we haven't got to, but we will answer them all in full on the frequently asked questions that will be published alongside the recording of the session after we've concluded all of the sessions. And I'll just come to Councillor Lewis and Rob for any closing remarks.
Just briefly to say thank you to everyone who's been a participant in the session tonight. Really important. Thanks for the questions. Sorry we didn't get to everyone, but we will make sure we get answers out. And thanks to all of the library staff who are working so hard in really tough times. So thank you.
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, just to echo Councillor Lewis's thanks for everybody coming along tonight. It really is good to see your passion and commitment to the library service, particularly in Bradmore Green. And please do come forward if you have suggestions or questions or are interested in operating or running a community-run library, and we'll start those conversations with you. I would, just a call to continue to complete the survey, and as I so there is another session at 6:45 tonight for Sanderstead Library. If you are available to attend, please do so. Following the same link, not the same link, sorry, just to clarify, the same Eventbrite route on the library's consultation website. A recording of this session will be made available for future posterity and for you to be able to look back on for any of the information. The slides and the additional paperwork and frequently asked questions will be uploaded onto the library's consultation website. You will all have seen that a poll has just gone up onto your screens. Please do take the time to complete that. We do welcome your feedback. Our dedicated email address for the consultation is librariesconsultation@croydon.gov.uk, and we have a dedicated answer phone, which is 02078845159, where if you leave a message and contact details, then a member of the library's team will give you a call back, either to arrange for a paper survey to be sent out or to complete a survey online or to help answer any of your questions. And just thank you again.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody.